prominent member of Donald Trump's transition team is touting a registry for immigrants from nations which he calls high risk. That could mean the incoming administration revives a controversial program which critics say unfairly targets Muslims based on their religion. Our senior investigative correspondent, Drew Griffin, is digging into all of this, looking for details. What are you learning, Drew?
Wolf, the campaign promise was extreme vetting for potential terrorists. This certainly seems to be the start of that policy.
It is an idea that has immigration groups in a panic, forcing people from some majority Muslim nations to register when they come to the U.S. And it comes from this man, Chris Kobach, the Kansas Secretary of State, a highly polarizing figure who's an immigration hardliner and reportedly helping President-elect Trump form immigration policy.
My plan ends illegal immigration and suspends immigration from terror-prone regions. Now, I have to tell you, we're going to have the wall.
The idea isn't new. The U.S. had such a registry in place for 9 years. It was called the NSEERS, or National Security Entry-Exit Program, developed largely by Chris Kobach when he worked at the Department of Justice.
One of the things that we did right after 9/11, I say we, the Justice Department, was to implement the NSEERS system, which took people from high-risk countries and required that they check in after 30 days.
Immigrants and visitors from more than 24 countries were required to check in, be interviewed, fingerprinted, and monitored while they were in the U.S. Virtually all of those countries were predominantly Muslim. Kobach is talking with the Trump transition team to bring it back. Critics call it a Muslim registry. Today, in a text to CNN, Kobach says it's no such thing. There is no registry of Muslims proposal whatsoever, he wrote. The model I discussed was the NSEERS system for screening aliens from high-risk areas without regard to religion. The program began under President George Bush following the 9/11 attacks. It ended 9 years later. An Inspector General's report in 2012 called the program then obsolete, unreliable, and an inefficient use of resources. The ACLU, which fought the program, says it was worse than that.
It actually made genuine efforts at trying to combat terrorism more difficult by destroying relationships with immigrant communities and actually negatively impacting the ability of the federal government to cooperate with foreign governments in fighting terrorism.
The screening of people from certain high-risk countries is just the start of the ACLU's problems with Chris Kobach. He has spoken before groups critics consider to be white nationalist. He's pushed for very strict immigration laws in at least 6 states. He was the architect behind Arizona's controversial State Bill 1070, which allows police to ask for immigration papers for anyone who looks like they might be from another country. Kobach has been sued at least 6 times over his policies against illegal immigrants. The ACLU says if Trump follows his advice, they expect to file many more lawsuits.
Our focus is on his policies and on the abject failure of those policies to respect the Constitution and the laws, and the fact that they've been incredibly discriminatory.
No official comment, Wolf, from the Trump transition team, but now 2 sources familiar with this process are telling CNN it's not all majority Muslim countries part of this current list. It seems the countries with heavy ISIS presence, though, are a campaign promise again from Donald Trump. Wolf?
Drew Griffin reporting for us. Thanks very much. Let's talk about all of this and more with our political experts and guests. Harris Zafar is joining us right now. Harris, I'll start with you. You're a spokesman for the Ahmadiyya Muslim community here in the United States. What is your reaction when you hear about this proposal to revive what in effect is a registry of people from largely Muslim majority countries coming to the United States?
Well, Wolf, as Muslims who believe in the Messiah, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian, we within the Ahmadiyya Muslim community find it patently absurd and profoundly appalling that in the 21st century we have people vying for leadership roles in President-elect's cabinet who are advocating for the removal of rights from the U.S. Constitution. We have people talking about this is a precedent set by what we did to the Japanese in internment camps, which is not a success story. That's an embarrassment and a stain on the legacy of the United States. And so the question is, why is this registry idea scary? Of course, on the one side, we have droves, we have swarms of Americans who are coming to Muslim neighbors to show their support. They're going on trueislam.com, they're adding their list to the growing number of Americans to show support for that cause. But you do also have a growing segment in the past 10 days who have been attacking Muslims, threatening them, berating them, vandalizing property, attacking Muslim women. So under the leadership of the Khalifa of Islam, we're saying let's not talk about things that are unconstitutional, that take away people's human rights. Instead, let's talk about discussion and dialogue and bringing people together from the opposite ends. That's what makes us American.
Because I just want to point out that the person promoting the intern camps was a supporter of Donald Trump, not a member of the transition team. Just want to be precise. Have you actually seen within your community, Harris, I know you're well plugged in, violence, attacks against Muslims resulting from all of the conversation that's been going on?
I've indeed had conversations with Muslims who have faced or their family members have faced physical attacks. Within the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in particular, we haven't yet. Our mosque in Connecticut was shot up last year in a famous incident. But so far, it hasn't been exclusively our community, but in the broader community, absolutely. We've seen Muslims that have been attacked with vandalism on their property, and even Muslim women who've had their hijabs physically pulled off. And so this is something of concern. Of course, His Holiness told us that he doesn't believe this can actually be enacted. He doesn't believe that Muslims can truly be round up and their rights taken from them in a society and a government like the United States. So we should stay calm, but at the same time, speak out when anyone's rights, Muslim or not, are being taken from them.
You know, it's interesting, Sarah, and you've covered this campaign from the beginning. He started off, Donald Trump, with a temporary ban on all Muslims coming to the United States, but that was moderated later to extreme vetting, not necessarily of all Muslims. Where do you expect, based on all the conversations, the reporting you've done as President of the United States, where do you expect Donald Trump to move this policy?
Well, I think that's still an open question, in part because, you know, that's not what Donald Trump is spending his days holed up in Trump Tower working on. He's still building out his cabinet. And he did moderate his tone. He talked about extreme vetting, but he also talked about how that was an expansion of the Muslim ban. He said he wasn't rolling it back. And as part of that extreme vetting, there was also a religion test, which raised a whole new set of red flags for people, because obviously, under our Constitution, you're free to practice any religion without persecution from the government. So I think that it's a little irresponsible for us to say, here's what Donald Trump would do as president, and to sort of try to walk back his rhetoric to make people feel better. I think that people have a real reason to be concerned right now, and we need to wait to see what policies he actually proposes and see if that was sort of the beginning of walking back not just rhetoric, but also policy.
Mark, you broke the story that Mitt Romney is going to be meeting this weekend with Donald Trump and may be actually interested in getting a cabinet position, Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, for example. How serious do you, based on all the conversations you've had in your reporting, how serious is that possibility?
I think it's a lot more serious than most people think, and for a couple of reasons. One, a lot of people were taken aback, including those in the Romney orbit, and quite frankly, those in the Trump orbit as well. But it does say something about both men. One, that Donald Trump is bringing his enemies and seeking counsel, or at least trying to break down whatever anger they had towards one another. Nikki Haley today. We saw Ted Cruz earlier this week. And, of course, Mitt Romney now will be meeting with Donald Trump in New Jersey on Saturday for this meeting. Now, I'm told that they will discuss the Secretary of State job, which would be an interesting job for Mitt Romney, given the fact that he does know global affairs, but he also understands the global economy. And really, those are two things that really go hand in glove. In addition to that, our own Jamie Gangel is reporting that Mitt Romney has expressed interest in continuing to serve the country, which I think we have all covered him enough that we know really where his heart is, and that he's actually mentioned the Secretary of State job as something that he would be interested in doing. This all comes as Rudy Giuliani was said to be the front runner for the Secretary of State job. However, we saw what happened with questions about what would go on with the Rudy Giuliani confirmation process.
As you know, Rebecca Berg, in the final weeks of the campaign, Donald Trump's theme was drain the swamp. Now they've decided to eliminate lobbyists from the transition team and to say anybody who serves, of the 4,000 political appointees, serves in the government in the Trump administration would not be able to become lobbyists for 5 years after leaving the government. And I assume there's more of that on the way.
Yes, and that was certainly an important first gesture for Donald Trump. But during this transition process, there's really an interesting balance that he needs to strike, Wolf, because on the one hand, Donald Trump ran as an outsider. He doesn't have any government experience of his own, doesn't understand policy at the level of people who do have government experience. And so he needs some people who have served in government to kind of guide him through this process and serve in his cabinet. On the other hand, because of this drain the swamp promise, you don't want only insiders in his administration. And so that's why he's going to need to turn as well to some what we would consider outsiders, people maybe who have worked in business, people who have gone on to do other things outside of government. But it's a really interesting balance that he needs to strike. Certainly the lobbying ban is an important gesture. It shows that he's going to be serious about looking outside of Washington, looking outside of Washington insiders to help shape his administration.
All right, everybody stand by. There's more coming up. And to our viewers, please be sure to check out the first ever book from CNN Politics. It's called Unprecedented, the election that changed everything. It'll be in bookstores December 6th in stores around the country. You can pre-order your copy, though, right now at cnn.com/book. Coming up, new questions about whether a nuclear-armed Japan could help counterbalance the threat posed by North Korea. Donald Trump suggested the idea during the campaign. Is he discussing it with Japan's prime minister right now? Stay with us. We're expecting new details about this first meeting the president-elect is having with a foreign leader.